over 100 million gallons of water. That's what it takes to float a 100,000-ton warship back to life. In April 2024, the USS John C. Stennis emerged from one of America's most complex engineering operations, a process so precise that a single miscalculation could sink the entire vessel. Right now, the USS Ronald Reagan sits in dry dock, undergoing the same transformation. The rollout process involves massive keel blocks, synchronized flooding systems, and a team of thousands working around the clock. This isn't just maintenance. This is bringing a floating city back from the dead. Introduction. When a U.S. Navy aircraft carrier enters dry dock, it's because something critical needs attention. These aren't quick fixes. We're talking about overhauls that can last anywhere from 6 months to several years. The Nimitz-class carriers, which form the backbone of American naval power, undergo what's called an RCOH, Refueling and Complex Overhaul. During this time, the ship's nuclear reactors are refueled, the hull is repaired, weapon systems are upgraded, and thousands of components are replaced or restored. But here's what most people don't realize. Getting the carrier back into the water is just as complicated as the repairs themselves. The rollout process is a carefully orchestrated event involving precise engineering, massive amounts of water, and coordination between hundreds of skilled workers. One wrong move, and you're looking at catastrophic damage to a billion-dollar asset. If you're proud of the men and women who keep these mighty ships operational, type "proud" in the comments below. The dry dock environment. Let's start with where this all happens. The primary facility for aircraft carrier overhauls is Newport News Shipbuilding in Virginia. This shipyard has been building and maintaining carriers for over a century. Their Dry Dock 12 is absolutely massive, 662 meters long and 76 meters wide. It's the largest construction dry dock in the Western Hemisphere. When a carrier enters dry dock, it doesn't just sail in and park. The dock must first be flooded to match sea level. Once the water levels are equal, tugboats carefully guide the carrier into position. This alone can take hours because these ships are so large that there's often less than a meter of clearance on either side. Once the carrier is perfectly aligned, the real work begins. The dock gates close, and powerful pumps start draining the water. As the water level drops, the ship slowly settles onto specially positioned keel blocks. These aren't just random supports. They're wood-capped concrete structures strategically placed according to the ship's unique weight distribution. The engineering behind this is remarkable. Each carrier has what's called a docking plan, a detailed blueprint showing exactly where every support block must be positioned. Get this wrong, and the ship's hull could be damaged or the vessel could become unstable. The keel blocks bear the entire weight of the ship, which for a Nimitz-class carrier is around 100,000 tons when fully loaded. The overhaul process. Now the carrier sits high and dry, exposed like a beached whale. What happens next is extraordinary. Scaffolding goes up around the entire hull. Work crews swarm the ship, accessing areas that are normally underwater and impossible to reach. During the RCOH process, the shipyard essentially takes the carrier apart and rebuilds it. The nuclear reactors are defueled and then refueled, a process that happens only once during the ship's 50-year lifespan. Thousands of valves, pumps, and piping components are replaced. The propulsion systems are completely overhauled. The propeller shafts are restored, and refurbished propellers and rudders are installed. On the exterior, major structural updates happen to the island. That's the tower structure on the deck where the bridge is located. The mast and antenna systems get upgraded with the latest technology. All aircraft launch and recovery equipment is modernized. The entire hull gets repainted, including the underwater portions that protect against corrosion and marine growth. But here's what really shows the scale of this operation. During the USS George Washington's RCOH, workers represerved approximately 600 tanks inside the ship. They replaced thousands of individual components. Over 3,200 shipbuilders and 2,000 suppliers from across the country contributed to the work. The USS John C. Stennis spent time in dry dock starting in 2021. By April 2024, when it was ready to roll out, the dry dock portion of the overhaul was complete. But the work itself required 836,000 man-hours just for the dry dock infrastructure improvements needed to support the project. Preparing for rollout. After months or years of intensive work, the moment finally arrives. It's time to get the carrier back in the water. But you can't just open the floodgates and hope for the best. The preparation for rollout is meticulous. First, engineers conduct a complete stability assessment. They calculate the ship's center of gravity, which has changed during the overhaul process. Equipment has been added, removed, or repositioned. Fuel tanks and ballast tanks must be at specific levels. Everything must be precisely measured and documented. The ship needs what's called positive metacentric height, a stability measure that ensures it won't tip over when it starts floating again. Get this calculation wrong, and the carrier could capsize during undocking. Most ships are trimmed slightly stern down during this process for added stability. Side blocks are also positioned along the hull. These aren't load-bearing like the keel blocks, but they prevent the ship from shifting sideways as the water rises. Every block placement is double-checked against the docking plan. Before we continue with the actual rollout process, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Over 98% of viewers watch without subscribing. It costs you nothing but makes a huge difference to us. Now, let's see how they actually move this beast. The flooding begins. The rollout day arrives. This isn't a quick process. Flooding the dry dock takes several days and happens in carefully controlled phases. For the USS John C. Stennis, the shipyard pumped more than 100 million gallons of water into the dock. To put that in perspective, that's enough water to fill about 150 Olympic-sized swimming pools. The flooding begins slowly. First, water enters through intake valves at the bottom of the dock. Engineers monitor the water level constantly, checking for any signs of instability in the ship. The initial flooding brings the water up about 10 feet, just reaching the keel blocks. At this point, tests are conducted. Divers inspect the hull underwater. Engineers check for leaks and verify that all systems are responding correctly. The ship's pumps and bilge systems are activated to ensure everything is working properly. Any issues discovered now can be addressed before the ship is fully afloat. As the water continues rising, the buoyancy of the ship gradually increases. The weight supported by the keel blocks decreases as the water takes over. This transition is critical. The ship must lift off the blocks evenly. If one section lifts before another, it could cause structural stress or damage. When the USS John F. Kennedy was flooded out for its christening in 2019, the process took several days. Engineers paused repeatedly to conduct inspections and tests. They measured the gap between the keel and the blocks, ensuring the ship was lifting uniformly. The side blocks remain in place during this phase, preventing any lateral movement. Remember, there's minimal clearance in the dock. Any sideways drift could result in the hull scraping against the concrete dock walls. Floating free. Finally, the water level reaches the point where the carrier is fully floating. The keel blocks are no longer in contact with the hull. The ship is now supported entirely by buoyancy. This moment represents months or years of work coming to fruition. But the carrier isn't moved immediately. Even though it's floating, it's still confined within the dry dock. More tests are conducted. The ship's propulsion systems are tested. Communications equipment is checked. Navigation systems are verified. Everything must be functioning before the ship leaves the protected environment of the dry dock. Once all systems check out, tugboats are brought in. For a vessel this size, you need multiple powerful tugs. When the USS John F. Kennedy was moved, 11 tugboats were required. The timing must be perfect. These moves often happen during specific tidal windows when conditions are optimal. The dry dock gates open. Slowly, carefully, the tugboats begin pulling the carrier out. The ship moves at a crawl, maybe a few feet per minute. Every inch is monitored. Harbor pilots coordinate the operation, constantly adjusting the tug positions to keep the carrier centered. As the carrier exits the dry dock, it enters open water for the first time in months or years. But it's not headed back to sea just yet. Instead, it's moved to what's called an outfitting berth, a pier location where the final phases of the overhaul will be completed. At the outfitting berth, the remaining work continues. Electronics are tested. Combat systems are brought online. The propulsion systems undergo sea trials while the ship is still docked. This phase can last several more months. For the USS George Washington, the rollout from dry dock marked the 60% completion point of its RCOH. There were still 2 more years of work ahead before the carrier would be redelivered to the Navy. The challenge of infrastructure. Here's something most people don't realize. The United States is facing a serious dry dock shortage. The Navy has only 4 public shipyards capable of maintaining nuclear-powered carriers: Norfolk and Portsmouth on the East Coast, and Puget Sound and Pearl Harbor on the West Coast. Between these facilities, there were only 18 dry docks capable of handling nuclear vessels. But in recent years, 4 of them were closed due to seismic concerns. The dry docks at Puget Sound Naval Shipyard in Washington sit on a fault line. Navy engineers determined the risk of earthquake damage was too high. If an earthquake hit during maintenance operations, the dry dock could literally be swallowed by the ground, taking a carrier or submarine with it. This closure created a massive problem. Currently, 36% of the Navy's attack submarine fleet is either in maintenance or waiting for maintenance. With fewer dry docks available, those wait times will only increase. For carriers, it's even more critical. Dry Dock 6 at Puget Sound was the only West Coast facility certified for nuclear aircraft carriers. With its closure, any carrier needing major repairs on the West Coast must now be relocated all the way to the East Coast. That's thousands of miles of transit time before maintenance can even begin. The Navy is investing billions in the shipyard infrastructure optimization plan to address these issues. Norfolk Naval Shipyard's Dry Dock 4 recently completed a $191 million renovation that took multiple years. The project involved placing over 30,000 cubic yards of concrete and required 830 6,000 man-hours of construction. Current operations. Right now, as you watch this video, the USS Ronald Reagan is in dry dock at Bremerton, undergoing a 17-month maintenance period that began in March 2025. The Reagan served as the forward-deployed carrier in Japan from 2015 to 2024, operating continuously in one of the most demanding regions of the world. After returning to the United States, it moved to Naval Base Kitsap in Washington. The crew of approximately 2,800 sailors doesn't just sit idle during this time. They perform duties on the ship, assist with maintenance tasks, and take on additional assignments around the base. Some live in local housing, while auxiliary facilities provide workspace and storage. The USS John C. Stennis, which completed its dry dock rollout in April 2024, is still undergoing the final phases of its RCOH. Once complete, this carrier will be equipped to operate for the second half of its 50-year service life. Every system will be modern, the nuclear fuel will last another 25 years, and the ship will be ready to project American power anywhere in the world. The Navy is also preparing infrastructure for the new Ford-class carriers. These next-generation carriers have significantly higher electrical power requirements than the Nimitz-class ships. Naval Base Kitsap is undergoing a $300 million overhaul of its electrical systems to accommodate the USS John F. Kennedy, which is scheduled to homeport there beginning in 2029. Newport News Shipbuilding recently completed renovations that allow it to build 2 Ford-class carriers simultaneously in Dry Dock 12 for the first time in history. This capability is crucial as the Navy works to maintain its fleet of 11 aircraft carriers. Conclusion. Rolling out a U.S. aircraft carrier after major dry dock repairs isn't just about filling a dock with water and floating a ship. It's a testament to American engineering excellence, the skill of thousands of workers, and the commitment to maintaining the most powerful naval force the world has ever seen. Every carrier that completes this process emerges stronger, more capable, and ready to serve for decades more. The men and women who plan these operations, who position every block, who monitor every phase of the flooding, who guide these massive vessels back into the water, they're the unsung heroes keeping our Navy ready. The USS Stennis is proof that even after years of service, these ships can be completely rebuilt and modernized. The process takes time, costs billions, and requires incredible precision. But the result is worth it. A fully operational supercarrier ready to defend American interests anywhere on Earth. The dry dock may drain, and the work may be hidden from view, But what happens inside those massive concrete structures is nothing short of remarkable. It's where the backbone of American naval power is maintained, rebuilt, and prepared for whatever comes next. If you found this fascinating, hit that like button and subscribe for more in-depth looks at America's military capabilities. We'll see you in the next one.